Hello everyone, and welcome back to Sun Moon Audiobook, the channel where we share wisdom and inspiring book journeys to help you grow and develop your best self, inside and out. The fire of certainty is warm, but it can burn the soul when held too tightly. Imagine standing in a dark forest at night, clutching a lantern so close that its brightness blinds you from seeing the path ahead. You feel safe in that small circle of light, but in truth, you are trapped by it. The only way to find your way forward is to loosen your grip, to risk dimming the flame, and to let your eyes adjust to the greater night that reveals the stars. That is the spirit of Think Again. The reminder that true wisdom is not found in holding on, but in letting go, in unlearning, in relearning, in daring to see beyond the small circle of what we think we know. Adam Grant, the author of this book, is not just a professor or a researcher. He is a voice that bridges science and soul, a teacher of psychology who has spent his life studying how people think, work, and grow. His words carry the rare blend of rigor and tenderness, facts backed by research, but told with a heart that believes in human possibility. When Grant speaks of rethinking, it is not academic distance, it is a call to courage. His career has been about understanding why people succeed, why they fail, and why the ones who thrive are often those who are willing to admit they were wrong. And this message, this simple but radical call to rethink's the heartbeat of everything he writes. The first breath of this book is a challenge to the way we define intelligence. For so long, we have been taught that being smart means having answers, being quick to speak, being firm in opinion. But Grant reminds us that real intelligence is not the stubborn defense of what we know, it is the humility to question it. It is not being a preacher clinging to doctrine, or a prosecutor proving others wrong, or a politician swaying for approval. It is becoming a scientist in everyday life, curious and tentative, testing, revising, exploring. To rethink is to live like a scientist, to treat our beliefs as hypotheses, not sacred truths, and to welcome disconfirming evidence as a gift. This is hard because certainty feels safe. Certainty feels like solid ground under our feet, while doubt feels like quicksand. But think about the times in your life when certainty betrayed you. A belief you held about someone that proved false. A dream you thought was the only way forward that ended up breaking apart. A plan you clung to that crumbled, only to make room for something better. Certainty can comfort us, but it can also cage us. Rethinking is the key that opens that cage. Take the story of Mike Lazaridis, the founder of BlackBerry. He believed so strongly in the device he had created a phone for email, with a physical keyboard that he could not rethink when the iPhone emerged. He clung to his certainty, and it cost him the empire he built. Compare that with someone like Ray Dalio, the billionaire investor who made rethinking his entire philosophy. He created a culture in his firm where being wrong was not shameful, but expected, where the ability to update your view in light of new evidence was celebrated as strength. One clung to certainty and fell. The other embraced doubt and rose. The lesson is simple, but it aches with truth. Your strength is not in being right, but in being willing to change. The mantra whispers again and again, true strength is rethinking. And yet, we resist. Why? Because letting go of an idea feels like letting go of a part of ourselves. Our beliefs become stitched into our identity, and to question them feels like questioning who we are. This is why arguments rarely change minds. When someone attacks your belief, it feels like they are attacking your core. But Grant shows us that identity can be reshaped. You are not your beliefs. You are the learner who holds them. And the learner can always choose again. You who are listening right now may feel the sting of this. Perhaps there is something you've been holding tightly, an idea, a certainty, a story about yourself or the world. Maybe it feels too costly to reconsider it. But what if letting go is the first step to healing? What if the doorway to who you want to become is hidden behind the belief you've refused to release? Think of NASA when they failed to anticipate the Challenger disaster. Engineers had warnings, doubts, evidence, but culture demanded certainty, demanded speed, demanded belief in the mission. Tragedy followed. Now compare that with doctors who save lives because they are willing to say, "I don't know," and to seek second opinions. Humility doesn't weaken us, it protects us. Rethinking, then, is not only personal, it is collective. Whole organizations thrive or collapse based on whether they can question themselves. Kodak invented the digital camera but buried it, too committed to film. Nokia dominated phones but dismissed smartphones. History is littered with the bones of those who refuse to rethink. And yet, the opposite is also true. Netflix began as DVDs by mail and dared to rethink into streaming. Amazon began as books online and dared to rethink into everything. The world rewards those who keep learning. There is also the matter of how we approach disagreement. Most of us argue to win, not to understand. We treat conversation as combat, not collaboration. But Grant offers another way. The art of listening, of asking questions that open rather than close, of engaging with curiosity instead of contempt. It is not about debating to score points. It is about dancing with ideas to see where they might lead. Think of Abraham Lincoln, who surrounded himself with people who disagreed with him. He called it his team of rivals. He knew that wisdom comes not from echo chambers, but from friction, from the fire of ideas colliding. This practice listening deeply, questioning gently, staying open's a not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. Because in listening, you do not lose yourself. You expand yourself. You become bigger, wider, richer, because you now hold more than just your own voice. There was a moment once when I sat across from a friend whose worldview was the mirror opposite of mine. My instinct was to defend, to argue, to prove. But something in me softened, and instead I asked, "Tell me more. Help me see it through your eyes." What unfolded was not agreement, but understanding. And in that space of understanding, the tension gave way to respect, and respect gave way to connection. I did not change my belief entirely, but I changed the way I held it. I held it more loosely, and that looseness set me free. This is the heart of rethinking, not to erase what you know, but to hold it with open hands. Doubt is not the enemy, it is the compass. We often fear doubt because it unsettles us, makes us feel small, fragile, unsure. But Grant shows us that doubt, when paired with curiosity, becomes the beginning of wisdom. It is the crack in the shell where light can seep through. Without doubt, we are stagnant. With doubt, we are moving, shifting, alive. This does not mean living in paralysis or indecision. It means living in the flow of growth, willing to adjust with the tides of new knowledge. One of the most dangerous traps we fall into is what psychologists call the armchair quarterback syndrome, or overconfidence, the sense that we know more than we do. You've seen it when someone, after skimming one article online, speaks like an expert. Or when we ourselves, having had one success, assume we have mastered the whole field. But overconfidence is a thief. It robs us of humility, blinds us to risks, and makes us brittle in the face of change. Think of the 2008 financial crisis, fueled in part by the hubris of experts who believed they had conquered uncertainty. Overconfidence built towers on sand. But when you replace overconfidence with what Grant calls confident humility, everything changes. Confident humility is not weakness, it is knowing that you are capable, but also aware of what you do not know. It is the surgeon who has practiced 1,000 times, yet still pauses to double-check. It is the leader who makes bold decisions, yet still invites dissent. It is the student who excels but keeps asking questions. This blend of confidence and humility is what keeps you grounded and growing at the same time. And isn't that what life calls us to? To be bold enough to step forward, yet humble enough to step back. To walk the path of learning with steady feet, knowing that you will never reach the end, and that this is not failure, but freedom. Because the point is not to arrive at perfect knowledge. The point is to keep learning, keep rethinking, keep becoming. Another thread Grant weaves through his message is the importance of detaching our opinions from our identity. When your opinions become who you are, Every challenge feels like an attack. But when your opinions are simply ideas you are holding, then rethinking them is no more threatening than changing tools in your hands. The hammer you used yesterday may not work today, but that does not mean you are less, it means you are wise enough to adapt. Imagine your beliefs like clothes. They cover you, protect you, express you. But as the seasons shift, you change them. The clothes are not your skin. You can shed them and put on something new. Nowhere is this more needed than in today's world, where polarization deepens and people shout past each other instead of listening. The courage to rethink, to hold beliefs lightly, to engage without losing yourself, that is not only a personal virtue, it is a societal survival skill. Without it, we become tribes in echo chambers, building walls around certainty and hurling stones of contempt. With it, we become communities of learners, bridging divides, finding common ground in curiosity. Grant also points us to the practice of motivational interviewing, a method used by therapists and coaches. Instead of telling someone they are wrong, you ask questions that help them articulate their own reasons for change. Instead of pushing, you invite. This is the power of curiosity. It disarms defensiveness and plants seeds of possibility. Imagine what would happen if more of our conversations worked like this. If instead of trying to win, we tried to understand. If instead of proving, we invited, the world would soften. Think, too, of how this applies to parenting, to teaching, to leadership. Children thrive not when they are told what to believe, but when they are taught how to think. Students grow not when they are rewarded for right answers alone, but when they are encouraged to ask better questions. Teams succeed not when the leader is always right, but when the leader creates a space where being wrong is safe. The environments that flourish are those that honor curiosity over certainty, process over pride. There is a midway point in this journey where you might feel torn. On one side, the comfort of old certainties, the safety of familiar beliefs. On the other, the unknown, the possibility of change, the vulnerability of admitting you were wrong. This is the tension of rethinking, and in this tension, you might feel small, even afraid. But hear this. The discomfort you feel is not a signal to retreat, is the sign that growth is happening. Growth is always uncomfortable, always stretching, always pulling us beyond what we thought we could hold. You are not alone in that discomfort. Everyone who has ever reinvented themselves, who has ever dared to let go of an old story, has felt this same ache. Think of Malala Yousafzai, rethinking what courage meant when she stood for education against threats of violence. Think of Nelson Mandela, rethinking revenge into reconciliation, building a bridge of forgiveness instead of a wall of bitterness. These figures were not born fearless. They simply chose to hold their certainties loosely and to embrace a higher possibility. The mantra returns. Gentle but insistent true strength is rethinking. Practical rethinking can start small. It can be as simple as asking yourself at the end of each day, what's one thing I might be wrong about? Or pausing in a heated argument to say, tell me more. I want to understand. It can be choosing to read a book from a perspective opposite your own, or to seek feedback from someone who sees the world differently. These small acts are like drops of water that over time carve canyons of wisdom. The beautiful paradox is this: the more you rethink, the more grounded you become. Because you are no longer standing on the shaky ground of brittle certainty. You are standing in the flowing river of learning. And rivers may change their course, but they always move forward. As you hear these words, you might feel a flicker of recognition inside yourself. A thought you've clung to that now feels lighter. A certainty you've carried that now feels looser in your hands. Let that be your starting point. Do not rush. Do not force. Just allow yourself to wonder, what if I'm wrong? Not with fear, but with curiosity. Not with shame, but with hope. Because to rethink is not to lose yourself, it is to discover yourself again and again. There is a quiet liberation that happens when we allow ourselves to rethink. It is like opening a window in a stuffy room. The air that once felt heavy begins to move, carrying in scents and sounds we had forgotten were possible. Grant tells us that rethinking is not simply about admitting mistakes. It is about building a mindset that welcomes revision as naturally as breathing. Imagine how freeing it is to live in a way where being wrong does not diminish you, but deepens you. Each moment of correction becomes not a bruise, but a blessing. Not an embarrassment, but an education. One of the most practical gifts in this book is the reminder to build what Grant calls challenge networks. Most of us surround ourselves with cheerleaders, people who affirm us, agree with us, and reassure us. And while affirmation has its place, growth comes from challengers. A challenge network is made of people who care enough about you to disagree, to question, to push back. These are the ones who point out blind spots, who ask the questions you avoided, who say what others might be too polite to mention. It is easy to resent them, but they are gold. Without challengers, we become stagnant. With them, we are refined like metal in fire. Think about how this principle plays out in history. Steve Jobs, though visionary, was famously stubborn. But when he returned to Apple in the late 1990s, one of his wisest moves was surrounding himself with colleagues who dared to question him. The result was a renaissance of innovation that gave birth to the iMac, the iPod, and eventually the iPhone. The brilliance did not come from Jobs alone. It came from the friction of a network that challenged him to rethink. Now consider the opposite leaders who silenced dissent, who surrounded themselves only with flatterers. They often fall, not because they lacked intelligence, but because they lacked the courage to hear another voice. For you, the listener, this means considering who is in your circle. Do you only welcome those who agree with you, or do you make room for those who see differently? When someone challenges you, do you bristle and defend, or do you lean in with curiosity? You may find that the voices that annoy you most are the ones you need most. Another jewel Grant offers is the practice of teaching as a way of learning. When you teach an idea to someone else, you are forced to rethink it, to test it, to simplify it in ways that reveal your own gaps. Teaching is not just the transfer of knowledge, it is the refinement of understanding. This is why mentors often say they learn as much from their students as they give. This is why explaining something out loud makes you realize what you don't quite grasp. So the act of teaching becomes an act of rethinking. There is also the danger of binary thinking, the habit of seeing the world in black and white, right or wrong, smart or stupid, good or bad. This narrow lens blocks nuance and blinds us to complexity. But the truth of life is layered, textured, filled with grays and gradients. When we embrace complexity, we gain perspective. We begin to see that two things can be true at once. That someone can be flawed and worthy. That a decision can carry risks and opportunities. That the world is not a courtroom where only one side wins, but a canvas where multiple colors blend. In your own life, this shift from binary to nuanced thinking can change everything. Imagine how arguments soften when you stop demanding absolute agreement and start exploring partial truths. Imagine how relationships heal when you allow room for contradiction. Imagine how decisions become wiser when you hold space for multiple perspectives. Rethinking, at its heart, is an invitation into nuance. But let us pause here for a moment, because this journey of rethinking is not easy. There will be times when you feel exhausted by uncertainty, when you crave the comfort of a solid ground. There will be days when rethinking feels less like liberation and more like chaos. And in those moments, it is tempting to retreat into certainty, to cling to old beliefs like a life raft. If you feel this tension, take heart. You are not failing. You are human. And the very fact that you feel this discomfort is proof that you are growing. Think of the butterfly. The caterpillar does not become wings without first dissolving in the cocoon, without losing its form, without entering a chaos that feels like undoing. But that undoing is the birth of something greater. Your discomfort in rethinking is that cocoon. It is the space where the old dissolves and the new takes shape. And so, the mantra whispers against true strength is rethinking. Even in small things, rethinking reshapes us. It might be as ordinary as admitting that the recipe you've always used could be improved, or that the routine you've clung to is no longer serving you. It might be acknowledging that the story you've told yourself about your worth, your potential, your limits was never the whole story. Rethinking does not always arrive as a grand revelation. Sometimes it slips in quietly through small adjustments, tiny shifts that over time transform the entire landscape of your life. There is also a deep compassion in this practice, because when you allow yourself to rethink, you begin to extend the same grace to others. You stop demanding perfection, and you start honoring growth. You see that everyone is a work in progress, that no one is defined forever by a single belief or a single mistake. This compassion becomes a balm in your relationships, a bridge in your communities, a light in the wider world. And in this, you become not only a rethinker for yourself, but a rethinker for others. You become someone who makes it safe for people to change their minds, to shed old skins, to step into new selves. You become the friend, the partner, the leader who says, it's okay to grow. It's okay to evolve. It's okay to be wrong today and wiser tomorrow. That is a gift beyond measure. To rethink is to live with the courage of the unfinished. Grant invites us to imagine our lives not as fixed portraits hanging on a wall, but as canvases still wet with paint. Each day we hold the brush again, layering, blending, reshaping. The colors we thought would dominate may fade. New shades may emerge we never expected. There is no shame in revising the canvas, because life was never meant to be completed in one stroke. It is meant to be lived as a living work of art. One of the most powerful ideas he shares is about joy in being wrong. At first, it sounds strange. Who could possibly enjoy being wrong? But think of it this way. When you discover you were wrong, it means you are now closer to truth. It means you have learned something you didn't know before. It means you are evolving. Being wrong is not a defeat. It is evidence of growth. Imagine if we could celebrate those moments the way scientists do, treating every disconfirmed hypothesis not as a loss, but as progress. How much lighter life would feel. This shift can change even the way we set goals. Too often, we set goals with rigid paths, believing success only counts if it arrives exactly as we envisioned. But rigid goals can blind us. They make us ignore better opportunities or stick to plans that no longer serve us. Flexible goals, however, allow room for rethinking. They keep us moving forward, but with eyes open to detours that may bring us somewhere even richer. Grant reminds us that the destination matters less than the willingness to adjust the journey along the way. It also shapes how we define success. If success is measured only by being right, then every mistake feels like failure. But if success is measured by learning, then even mistakes are victories. Every misstep becomes a step forward. Every wrong turn is still movement. In this way, rethinking transforms failure into fuel. Consider Thomas Edison, who famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." Edison understood that each error was not wasted, but a map of what to avoid next time. His willingness to rethink, to reframe failure as learning, is what brought light to the world. Now compare this to those who quit after one mistake, or who stubbornly repeat the same errors without rethinking. The difference is not intelligence, it is mindset. It is the choice to see being wrong as an ending or as a beginning. This practice of rethinking also deepens resilience. Life will always surprise us. Jobs disappear, relationships change, health falters, dreams shift. If we cling too tightly to a single path, we shatter when it breaks. But if we live in the spirit of rethinking, we bend instead of breaking. We adapt, we reimagine, we rebuild. Like bamboo in the wind, we are strong because we are flexible. And perhaps most importantly, rethinking teaches us to hold our identities lightly. Too often we define ourselves by one role: the job title, the relationship, the achievement. But roles can change, and if our identity is too tightly tied to them, we crumble when they are gone. Rethinking frees us to see identity not as a single role, but as a living, layered story. You are not just your career, not just your beliefs, not just your past. You are a learner, a grower, a rethinker. That identity cannot be taken away. For you listening right now, think about how this might apply to the stories you tell yourself. Maybe you have said, "I'm just not good at this," or "This is who I am and it will never change." What if those stories were only drafts, not final copies? What if the person you are today is not the finished version, but just one chapter in a much larger book? To rethink is to give yourself permission to keep writing, to keep editing, to keep evolving. There is a kind of gentle hope in this, because no matter where you are, no matter what mistakes you've made, no matter how long you've clung to a belief, you can always rethink. The door is never locked. The canvas is never dry. The story is never over. The midpoint of this journey may feel heavy, like carrying the weight of uncertainty on your shoulders. But lean in and listen. Uncertainty is not a burden, it is a doorway. When you step through it, you step into possibility. And possibility is where hope lives. So once again, the mantra returns. Like a steady heartbeat, true strength is rethinking. Imagine tomorrow waking up and choosing to live by this mantra. Imagine pausing before you argue and asking instead. Imagine admitting freely when you don't know and feeling no shame in it. Imagine celebrating the moment you realize you were wrong, because it means you have grown. Imagine inviting into your circle people who challenge you, people who make you rethink, people who push you toward wisdom. Imagine living not in the safety of stale certainties, but in the freshness of curiosity. That life is not only possible, it is waiting for you. Rethinking is not only a personal practice, it is also a gift we give to the world. When we learn to hold our beliefs lightly, we make space for others to breathe. When we listen with curiosity instead of judgment, we create environments where people feel safe to share, safe to question, safe to grow. Imagine a workplace where employees are not punished for admitting mistakes, but encouraged to bring them into the open so everyone can learn. Imagine a family where changing your mind is not mocked as weakness, but honored as courage. Imagine a society where debates are less about scoring points and more about building bridges. This is what Adam Grant calls us toward a culture of rethinking. In such a culture, innovation thrives. Because innovation is nothing more than rethinking the way things have always been done. It is saying, what if there's another way? And daring to try it. This is how progress is made, from medicine to technology to art. Every great breakthrough in history was born from someone willing to rethink. The Wright brothers rethought flight. Marie Curie rethought science. Martin Luther King Jr. rethought justice. Their courage to question what others accepted as impossible changed the course of humanity. But progress is not just the realm of great names. You too can be an innovator in your own world. Rethinking can reshape the way you solve problems at work, the way you nurture relationships, the way you raise children, the way you face your own struggles. Every time you let go of an old belief and make space for a new one, you are innovating your life. There is a practice Grant suggests, simple but profound. Think like a scientist. Not in the sense of wearing a lab coat or peering into microscopes, but in the mindset of curiosity. A scientist does not cling to hypotheses. They test them, they revise them, they abandon them when new evidence emerges. A scientist celebrates being wrong because it means they are closer to truth. To live like a scientist is to approach your own beliefs with that same openness, to say, this is my current best understanding, but I am willing to revise. Think of how freeing it is to live that way. You don't have to be burdened by defending every opinion as if your worth depended on it. You can release the need to always be right. You can live in the joy of being a learner. And when you encounter disagreement, you don't have to fight, you can explore. You can treat the conversation not as a battle, but as an experiment. There is also a subtle power in the way Grant teaches us to ask questions. Instead of demanding, why don't you see it my way? You can ask, what leads you to think that? Instead of insisting, am right, you can wonder, what might I be missing? Questions open doors. Statements close them. And when you choose to ask, you are already practicing rethinking. But none of this is to say, rethinking is easy. It asks for courage. It asks for humility. It asks for the willingness to sit in the unknown, to let go of ego, to risk change. And yet, every time you do, you grow. Every time you release the grip of certainty, your hands are free to reach for something greater. You, who are listening right now, may already feel the stirrings of this. A thought you've defended for years now feels softer. A belief you carried like armor now feels heavy. A certainty you once leaned on now feels shaky. Let that be the sign. Let that be the whisper calling you to rethink. You do not have to leap all at once. Just begin with curiosity. Just begin by loosening your grip. Remember that rethinking is not erasing. It is expanding. It is not losing yourself. It is becoming more of yourself. It is the gentle unfolding of a soul willing to learn. As we near the close of this journey, imagine what it would mean if more of us embraced this way of living. Imagine schools filled with students who are not afraid to be wrong, because they are taught that mistakes are maps. Imagine workplaces where leaders do not silence dissent, but welcome it as wisdom. Imagine communities where conversations across differences are not battles, but dances. Imagine homes where children are raised not to defend beliefs, but to explore them. That world is not fantasy. It begins with you, with me, with us choosing to rethink. And so the mantra returns once more, like a thread woven through the fabric of this message. True strength is rethinking. In the end, Adam Grant leaves us with a quiet but powerful truth. Rethinking is not a single act, but a lifelong practice. It is not a box to check, but a rhythm to live by. To rethink is to stay awake, to stay alive, to stay human in the truest sense. So, here is the invitation. Tonight, before you sleep, ask yourself one small question. What is one thing I could rethink? Tomorrow, in the midst of your routine, pause for a moment and listen more deeply than you usually do. In the week ahead, seek out one voice that challenges you, not to tear you down, but to make you grow. These are not grand gestures. They are small ripples. But ripples become waves. Waves reshape shores. And now, as this message comes to rest, picture a seed buried in the soil. To the eye, it looks like death, like darkness. But in truth, it is transformation. It is rethinking its form. It is letting go of being a seed to become something greater. And one day it breaks open, not because it was wrong to be a seed, but because it was always meant to grow. You are that seed. Your rethinking is your growth. Thank you for walking through this journey with me. If these words touched you, I invite you to carry them forward. Share them with someone who might need the reminder. Comment with your own insights, your own rethinking moments, so others can learn from your journey. Subscribe, not just to this space, but to the practice of staying curious, staying humble, staying open. Because the more we share, the more we grow together. And so I leave you with this vision. A sunrise breaking the horizon, not because the night was wrong, but because the day was always waiting. Let your sunrise come. Let your light rise through the power of rethinking.